Hi everyone, my name is Andy Yoon and welcome to another edition of T-SQL Tuesday. This month is the Video Star edition, hosted by Eric Darling, who has asked us to not necessarily blog, but instead create some video content because he's a big fan of video content. So let's get started. Sebastian here happens to have a question for y'all. When you're looking at your databases and thinking about your T-SQL code base, do you happen to have any views? And do those views happen to query other views inside that query additional views inside of those? I don't know about you all, but I've actually seen many different code bases where someone will create a really cool query and throw it into a view because, hey, I want to save it. I want to reuse it. And then someone else comes along and says, well, this is a really cool view, but I need to join a couple of extra tables. And I want to save that out to then encapsulate it and reuse it again. So I'm going to create another view on top of that. And then another view and another view. And additional developers just keep doing this and snowballing this until you wind up with a code base that winds up containing a whole ton of nested views. And unfortunately, there reaches a point with nested views, especially as your data volume scales and the complexity of those nested views continues to grow and snowball, where performance winds up going off of a cliff. Everything is fine up until one day you just hit a crazy kind of tipping point. At which point, then now it becomes a Sev1 issue, and now you have to deal with this, and now you have to try and start unraveling all of this code to really try and rewrite it and refactor it to flatten it out, if nothing else. So how can you do this? Well, the old-fashioned way, of course, is to just crack open each single view and see what queries or what elements that thing happens to query, and then crack open that subsequent view and crack open that subsequent view. And that is really tedious and time consuming. Or you can try out SP Help Expand View. I wrote this free community tool a number of years ago. In fact, I also did a presentation around it. And I thought I'd take today's T-SQL Tuesday to reintroduce new audiences to this to hopefully help you all out unravel some of your nested code. So let's take a quick look. I happen to have a very simple sample query here in my auto dealership demo database. This looks pretty simple. It's just a single select statement with a single element in my from clause. I'm just going after this VW salesperson annual profit. And this query runs pretty fast. It's not that big of a deal, but behind the scenes it's doing a whole heck of a lot more work than one might expect. And one easy way to quickly see that is to look at the estimated execution plan. And as I scroll around here in Management Studio, you can see that this execution plan is hitting many different objects, not one or two or three different tables, but quite a few down here. So it's a heck of a lot more complex than we initially thought. Now, this, of course, is just a quick demo, but I've seen many cases where these nested views, these seemingly simple queries, performance is extremely awful and it takes a very long time. So for fun, I decided to unravel this piece of code and rewrite it as a select statement with a bunch of sub-selects just to show you visually what this would look like in the context of being one single ginormous T-SQL select statement. So can you guess how many selects I've buried in this particular example? Well, let's start scrolling down and down. We've gone past 3 or 4 or 5 here, and I'm going to keep going and going and going and more. All the way down here, there are 24 discrete select statements that are buried inside of this nested view. Andy, you created a contrived example for this demo and for this presentation. Well, no, not really. All of this, and the reason I even built this tool in the first place is because I faced this kind of nightmare code base at a prior job. And 24 was kind of an average as far as some of the stuff that I was seeing in this production code base, because many people had had their hands in it. They were reusing code. They were actually taking an object-oriented methodology and mentality to their T-SQL, and it wind up causing performance to go off a cliff as the application's data volume continued to grow and expand. So I had to come in and deal with this. Henceforth, why I created SP Help Expand View. So let's take a quick look at this. First, I'm going to pass in the view name, and then I have a couple of different output formats. We're going to use the horizontal output format first, and this will read from left to right. On the left-hand side, we will see the originating object, which is this particular view. And on the first level, if you were to open up that particular view, you would see a query that selects from these different elements here. And if I were to open up this particular view, you would see that it would have a query that queries these elements here, and so on and so forth. And that's how you kind of read this from left to right. You'll note that most of these elements happen to be more views, but eventually you'll see the letter U in here, which stands for user table. This is the system abbreviation from sys tables or sys types. I forgot exactly which one, but that's the one that tells you that this is just a regular old table, like this here as well. But you see, for example, on layer 3, the inventory table is queried twice because I'm coming into it from two different elements or views further up the chain of the nesting of these different views. So this is kind of redundant, isn't it? Well, absolutely it is. If you want to do a different type of analysis, maybe across many different objects instead of one singular object, you can absolutely encapsulate this into kind of a loop. Yes, it's a loop. But this way you can roll over all of the different objects inside of your database in a loop and then dump all of the output into a single vertical table. And then because I have parent-child relationships in here, you can then do write some additional code to do that analysis. So this way you can do a much broader analysis of an entire database's code base. And I have an entire blog post that goes into this particular topic and actually shares some extra code on how to do this here to make use of this vertical output. One other cool thing here, I have this show object count optional parameter here, which at quick reference now shows you that, hey, remember how I pointed out we hit the inventory table twice? Now that's the referenced object count. Even worse, I hit my massive sales history table, not twice, but 3 times in here. That's not good. And so on and so forth. So you see how this particular stored procedure can help you potentially dig deeper to see how much nesting you happen to have in your code base. And by the way, even though this was originally developed for dealing with nested views, it also works for stored procedures by chance. So of course I intended it that way. So if you happen to have a lot of code or a code base that has a lot of nested stored procedures where you execute something and within there you execute another stored procedure and another, this will work against that to help you unravel those as well. All right. So let's jump back to the slides. So hopefully you found this quick little introduction useful, and hopefully we'll kind of check out SP Help Expand View. It's a free community tool. I built this for everyone to use, and I really hope that you'll check it out. Check out your own code base, and maybe you'll find that, oh, you happen to have a lot more nested code than you initially expected. It may be okay today, but you may want to kind of consider, is this something we may want to eventually deal with, because down the road it may become a problem for us as well. So with that, thank you very much for joining me for this edition of T-SQL Tuesday, the Video Star edition, and thanks to Eric Darling once again for hosting this month's T-SQL Tuesday. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.